Hi everyone, I'm Margaret Minnick from Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. In this presentation, I'm going to show you how Oregon's Marine Reserve's research team does their work and some of what they're finding out. So quickly, there are 5 marine reserve sites in Oregon's territorial sea. The territorial sea extends 3 miles out into the ocean, and it comprises about 1,000 square miles. The marine reserves are areas where all removal of marine life is prohibited, as is ocean development. Cape Falcon Marine Reserve is the northernmost of these, and it is located between Cannon Beach and Manzanita. So Oregon created marine reserves with 3 goals: to conserve marine habitats and biodiversity, to provide living laboratories for doing scientific research, and to do this while avoiding significant economic impacts. As part of the Marine Reserves program, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has an ecological research team that studies the marine reserves and similar nearby areas that are used as comparison areas for scientific studies. So this research helps to inform how Oregon can best manage our coastal waters going into the future. At Cape Falcon, ODF and W are collecting data on fish and invertebrate species, seaweed or macroalgae community composition, habitat characteristics, and oceanographic conditions. And to do this, they use hook and line catch and release sampling, SCUBA surveys, video landers, and at the other marine reserves, they use the remotely operated underwater vehicle, or ROV. But at Cape Falcon, they can't use it because our rocky reef is too shallow. So let's take a look at what this looks like in action. Here's a video lander being placed on the seafloor at Otter Rock Marine Reserve. So you might be able to see that there are 3 cameras mounted between the 2 circle-shaped metal plates. And this gives a 360-degree view of the landing site. The video landers record footage for a set length of time. Then scientists watch the footage and record data on what species they see, how big or old the animals are, and other characteristics. So here's an example of footage from a video lander. So this features the fish of Oregon's marine reserves. Most of these are many species of rockfish, and they're common off of Oregon's coast. So you can see that it's just a video from a stationary point. So these are pretty interesting fish. They live to be very old, like 80 to 100 years old, and the old female fish are really important because they have the most babies. So the old female fish are important for maintaining healthy populations, and areas like a marine reserve can provide an area where rockfish can actually get that old because there's no fishing. So here's some of the data that they're getting. In video lander surveys in 2016 and 2017, the 2 most abundant species observed at Cape Falcon were the black rockfish on the right and the giant white-plumed anemones pictured on the left there. For hook and line surveys, volunteer anglers go out with ODF and W scientists and catch fish, which are measured and released. This is a really fun and really popular volunteer opportunity. So if you are interested, you can get on the list with Oregon Marine Reserves. So when they're doing this, the fish species and size are recorded, and from the size, an approximate age of a fish can be estimated. So in this picture, you can see how they actually measure the fish. You can see they have a special tray on the right there that they use that has a ruler embedded in the bottom, and that's how they measure it. So here's a picture of a black rockfish that was caught and released there on the left. And then the largest fish that has been caught so far at Cape Falcon was a 45-inch lingcod. And that's almost 4 feet long. That's a pretty darn big fish. And so that picture on the right there, I'm not sure that that's that fish, but that is a pretty big lingcod that was caught at Cape Falcon. And that fish was caught in 2019. So what kind of data are we seeing? Well, the Marine Reserve is really just a bit too new to see any trends over time yet. So 4 years since the regulations, or since the reserve went into effect, that's just really a blip in time for many of the species that we have there. So for example, rockfish, I mentioned, have a lifespan of 80 to 100 years, crabs 30 to 40 years, sea stars 20 years. But this initial data that we're getting is still providing an important information, because none of this research was being done before the Marine Reserve was designated. So it's giving us a good picture of the beginning of marine reserves to measure against. So the graphs on this slide summarize the average species richness, which is the number of different species observed. And then the pie chart shows species catch composition for the reserve and comparison area. So that's the number of fish of each species caught. So black rockfish are the most abundant, as I mentioned, even more so in the Marine Reserve than in a comparison area. This chart shows 4 years of monitoring data at Cape Falcon Marine Reserve and at Cape Meares comparison areas. It shows the average catch of black rockfish varies from year to year. So why is this data important? So populations experience natural variation depending on ocean conditions and the availability of food. And populations can also change due to fishing pressure. So long-term data sets from ongoing monitoring let us track and differentiate changes due to natural variation versus those due to marine reserve protections. SCUBA surveys. This is another volunteer opportunity for people who are scuba divers. The folks who do this are specially trained by ODF and W to do these surveys. So these surveys at Cape Falcon have found lots of invertebrates. The most abundant were sea stars. You can see one on the top right there. On the right bottom, that's a pyrosome, which is kind of an unusual animal. And you can see how they measure the size of the animals they find. So I mentioned that there are remotely operated vehicles also that ODF and W has. They don't use them at Cape Falcon, but they're pretty cool. There's one being deployed. It's like a remote controlled submarine. And I have some footage here of that was taken with a remote operated submarine, so you can see. So here's what this footage looks like from the ROV. There are 2 lasers that come out into the water ahead of the vehicle that you can see there. And those are actually used as a measuring tool so that the researchers can determine the size of the organisms they're looking at in this footage. So lastly, just quickly, I wanted to go over Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. It is a 20 square mile area, and it's comprised of a no-take marine reserve, pictured in red here, and 2 associated MPAs in the dark blue. So this marine reserve is adjacent to Oswald West State Park, which is 2,500 acres. And as such, it's part of an interconnected system of conserved ecosystems. So you may know that land-sea connections drive many of the environmental processes along our coast. Just to name a couple, salmon, whose life cycles include time in both rivers and in the ocean. Sediment and runoff from land and rivers that ends up in the ocean can benefit or harm ocean water quality. And so having that conserved land and the conserved ocean side by side actually boosts the resilience of ecosystems on the land and in the ocean, so they can kind of work together. So thank you so much for watching. Our mission at Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve is to increase awareness and understanding of the Marine Reserve. And we do that through nature walks, hikes, community science projects, and presentations like this one. So feel free to contact me if you'd like to get involved or learn more. If you like these videos and photos, you can follow our Facebook and Instagram, where I'll be posting more of these. And you can also check out Oregon Marine Reserve's website at oregonmarinereserves.com for a lot more information. It's really a helpful website. So thank you so much for watching, and see you again soon.